I'm Huon Hooke, and this is The Real Review. The wine we're tasting today is Alkoomi Melaleuca Riesling, 2017 vintage, from the Great Southern in Western Australia. So this wine comes from the Great Southern, from the Franklin River district of the Great Southern. And the Great Southern vines were first planted in 1965 in the modern era. And it was only a few years later in 1971 that the Lange family, who already had a big farm, a general farm in the Great Southern, that's Merv and Judy Lange, planted their first vines in 1971, and a few years later produced their first wines. They went on to kick a lot of goals in the wine show system and get a lot of accolades. And they've, I think, retired now because their daughter, Sandy, and her husband, Rod, are now in charge of Alkoomi and continuing to produce some excellent wines in the Great Southern. The area is particularly well known for Riesling, and this is a gorgeous Riesling which fully lives up to the reputation of the region. So what does this wine taste like, this Alkoomi Riesling? It is, well, it's now 4 years old, so it's starting to show some the benefit of a little time in the bottle. Still very light in colour, still very fresh and youthful. It's a slow aging wine, you can tell that. It's going to be a long-term wine for sure. Beautiful, beautiful nose, very fragrant. Lovely limes and lemons, very citrusy. It hasn't yet started to develop the toasty characters that you get in aged Riesling. Those will come later, but there's a sort of minerally chalky overtone to it, which is rather nice as well. And the first wine for the day always hits you with acidity. Wow, that's got a really zingy acidity to it. Very delicate, very restrained, very fragrant and tight on the palate, very intense and real piercing, lemony, minerally acidity that goes right through that wine from the beginning to the end. Very appetizing, very refreshing, and it really makes you want to reach for some food, that wine. It's got a wonderful aperitif qualities. Yes, it's the sort of wine that really does need food, and I think it will really come into its own with a bit more age. So how do we rate this wine, this Alkoomi Riesling 2017? We rated it 95 points, which is a gold ribbon score. It was rated top rank. In other words, it got a very high ranking within its category. In fact, it was number 5 out of 38 Rieslings from the Great Southern region in the 2017 vintage. So that's a pretty high recommendation. We've suggested drinking it from now until 2024. I think that's only 3 years hence. I think I'm going to suggest that wine will live for at least 10 years more. No problem at all, as long as it's well cellared. So, food match. What would the winemaker Andrew Cherry like to serve with a wine like that? He recommends charcuterie, and sometimes, in his own words, homemade charcuterie. So I assume he makes his own sausages and cured meats at home. I think that would be good. I think the fattiness and the protein in charcuterie would go very well with the acidity in that wine. It certainly needs fatty food that it can cut through and keep your mouth refreshed at the finish. That acidity is wonderful. Cheers to that.